The first gunshot split the Wyoming sky like lightning, and Zara Ellwood barely had time to duck behind an overturned wagon before the second bullet whistled past. She pressed her back against the splintered wood, heart hammering against her ribs. Just 3 weeks into her new life out west, and already she'd stumbled into the middle of a bank robbery gone wrong. Foolishly, she'd thought the greatest danger would be teaching unruly children in the one-room schoolhouse, not dodging bullets in broad daylight. "Stay down, miss." The voice came from her left deep, commanding. Through the chaos, she spotted him, tall and broad-shouldered, a weathered Stetson pulled low over his eyes as he crouched behind a water trough. The stranger's revolver gleamed in the sunlight as he returned fire toward the bank. This wasn't what Zara had envisioned when she'd left Philadelphia in the spring of 1878. At 22, she'd come seeking purpose. A fresh start after her father's death left her without family or fortune. Her teaching credentials had secured her the position in Pine Creek, but nothing had prepared her for the lawlessness of frontier life. Another volley of shots rang out and the wood above her head splintered. "When I give the signal, run to me," the stranger called. Zara shook her head vigorously. "I can't, you've got to trust me," he fired twice more, then gestured urgently. Now, drawing a deep breath, Zara gathered her skirts and ran, her legs feeling like water as bullets kicked up dust at her heels. She crashed into the man's solid form as he pulled her behind the trough, shielding her with his body. "Name's Noah Fairfield," he said, reloading his revolver with practiced ease. "Town marshal, Zara Ellwood, the new schoolteacher," she gasped. "I've been in town less than a month." "Hell of a welcome," Noah muttered. "Those men are the Sutton gang. They've been hitting banks across the territory." A bullet pinged off the metal rim of the trough. "We can't stay here," he said. "My horse is tied behind the general store. When they reload, we make a run for it." Before Zara could protest, he grabbed her hand and pulled her to her feet. They sprinted down the dusty street, weaving between abandoned wagons and scattered crates. Noah's grip was firm, reassuring. Behind them, shouts and gunfire erupted anew. They reached a magnificent chestnut stallion, pawing nervously at the ground. In one fluid motion, Noah lifted Zara onto the saddle, then swung up behind her. He kicked the horse into motion, and they thundered out of town, the sounds of chaos fading behind them. "Where are we going?" Zara called over her shoulder. "Somewhere safe," Noah answered, his breath warm against her ear. "There's a ranch about 5 miles out. The owner's a friend." As they rode, Zara became acutely aware of Noah's arm around her waist, the solid wall of his chest against her back. Despite the circumstances, she felt a flush rise to her cheeks. The first hint of their trouble came as a distant rumble that shook the earth beneath the horse's hooves. Noah reined in, scanning the horizon. "What is it?" Zara asked. "Storm's brewing," he said, nodding toward the western sky where dark clouds gathered. "And it's coming fast." They urged the horse forward with renewed urgency, but the weather moved faster. The wind picked up, bringing with it the scent of rain and electricity. The rumble grew louder, more persistent. "We won't make it to the ranch before it hits," Noah said. "There's an old line shack up ahead. We'll wait it out there." The shack appeared just as the first fat drops of rain began to fall, a tiny, weathered structure nestled against a stand of cottonwoods. Noah helped Zara dismount, then led the horse to the meager shelter of a lean-to at the side of the cabin. Inside, the shack was sparse but dry. A small iron stove, a narrow bed frame with a thin mattress, a rough-hewn table with a single chair. Noah worked quickly to light the stove while Zara wrapped herself in a threadbare blanket she found folded on the bed. The storm descended with sudden fury. Rain lashed against the single window, and wind howled through the cracks in the walls. Then came the thunder, not the gentle rolling kind that presaged summer showers back east, but violent cracks that shook the very foundation of the shack. Zara flinched with each boom, drawing the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "They heard thunder rolling like war," the cowboy said. "It'll pass, I promise." Noah offered a reassuring smile as he set a dented tin cup of coffee before her. "Wyoming storms are fierce but quick." "Like everything else out here," Zara murmured, accepting the cup gratefully. Noah settled across from her, removing his hat to reveal a shock of dark hair and eyes the color of burnished copper. A thin scar ran along his jawline, and several days' worth of stubble shadowed his face. He wasn't conventionally handsome, but there was something compelling about the weathered planes of his features. "You're not from around here," he stated rather than asked. "Philadelphia," Zara confirmed. "I came west after my father died. There wasn't much left for me there." Noah nodded. "Most folks come west running from something or chasing after something." "Which were you?" she asked boldly. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Bit of both, I reckon." He sipped his coffee. "Been the marshal in Pine Creek going on 3 years now. Before that, I rode with a cattle outfit up from Texas." Lightning flashed, illuminating the small space in harsh white light, followed immediately by a deafening crack of thunder. Zara jumped, spilling coffee onto her skirt. "It's right on top of us," she whispered. Noah moved to the window, peering through the streaked glass. "Storms centered over the valley. Could be a while before it moves on." He turned back to her. "We're safe here, though. This shack has weathered worse." As if to challenge his assurance, the wind intensified, rattling the door on its hinges. "Why did you become a teacher?" Noah asked, clearly trying to distract her from the tempest outside. Zara smiled, grateful for the diversion. "I've always loved learning, and sharing that with others seemed the natural path. My father was a professor at the university. He believed education was the greatest gift one could give." She traced the rim of her cup. "When the position in Pine Creek opened, it felt like providence." "The children are lucky to have you," Noah said, and there was genuine warmth in his voice. "This territory needs more people willing to build rather than just take." Another crack of thunder and the cabin trembled. Rain found new paths through the aging roof, dripping steadily in the far corner. "Tell me about the Sutton gang," Zara said, pulling the conversation back to their earlier predicament. "Will they come after us?" Noah's expression darkened. "Unlikely. They'll be more concerned with getting away with whatever they manage to steal. But I'll need to send a telegram to the territorial marshal once we get back to town." He paused. "You handled yourself well today. Most folks would have panicked." "I was terrified," Zara admitted. "Being brave isn't about not feeling fear," Noah said quietly. "It's about doing what needs doing despite it." Something in his tone made Zara look at him more closely. There was a weight to his words, a history behind them. "You've faced them before, haven't you? The Suttons." Noah was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the glowing embers in the stove. "They killed my deputy last year, good man with a wife and young son." His jaw tightened. "I've been tracking them since." "I'm sorry," Zara said softly. Noah shrugged, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "It's the way of things out here. Life is harder, death comes quicker." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "It's why moments of beauty matter all the more." The simple profundity of his words struck Zara deeply. In that moment, with rain drumming on the roof and thunder rolling across the plains, she felt a curious connection to this man she'd just met, this protector with sad eyes and gentle hands. "The storm's moving east," Noah said, breaking the silence that had fallen between them. "Rain's letting up." Indeed, the thunder now sounded more distant, the wind less ferocious. "We should be able to make it back to town before nightfall," he continued, standing and stretching his tall frame. "Your students will be wondering where you've gone." Zara rose as well, folding the blanket carefully and placing it back on the bed. "Thank you, Marshal Fairfield, for saving my life today." "Noah," he corrected with a small smile. "And you're welcome, Miss Ellwood." "Zara," she returned. Something unspoken passed between them, a current as palpable as the electricity that had charged the storm. Then Noah cleared his throat and reached for his hat. "I'll check on the horse." As he stepped outside, Zara took a moment to compose herself. She smoothed her damp skirts and pinned her hair back into some semblance of order. This day had taken a most unexpected turn, but as she watched Noah through the window, leading his horse back toward the cabin, she couldn't find it in herself to regret a moment of it. The ride back to Pine Creek was quieter, the landscape transformed by the storm's passage. Streams had swelled, and the normally dusty earth gave off a rich, earthy scent. The sky to the west cleared to a brilliant blue, while retreating storm clouds painted the eastern horizon in deepening shades of purple and gray. "It's beautiful," Zara murmured, taking in the panorama. "This is why I stay," Noah said simply. "For all its harshness, there's nothing like the West." They arrived at the edge of town as the sun began its descent. The aftermath of the robbery was evident in the shattered windows of the bank, and the crowd still gathered in front of the sheriff's office. Noah guided his horse directly there, helping Zara dismount with hands that lingered perhaps a moment longer than necessary. "You should get home, get dry," he said. "I need to see what happened after we left." "Of course." Zara hesitated, suddenly reluctant to part ways. "Will you?" "Will I see you again?" Noah's expression softened. "Pine Creek's a small town, Miss Ellwood. I imagine our paths will cross sooner rather than later." With that promise hanging between them, Zara made her way to the small room she rented above the milliner's shop. As she changed into dry clothes and prepared a simple supper, her thoughts kept returning to the marshal with the steady hands and thoughtful eyes. Little did she know that their encounter was just the beginning of a story that would unfold across the wild Wyoming territory, a tale of danger and devotion, of thunder and promises kept. In the days that followed the bank robbery, Pine Creek buzzed with gossip about the Sutton gang and their daring escape. 2 men had been wounded in the shootout, a bank teller and one of the robbers, left behind by his companions. The latter now occupied a cell in the town jail, under Noah's watchful eye. Zara returned to her teaching duties, but found her thoughts frequently drifting to the marshal. Their paths crossed occasionally, a nod as they passed on the boardwalk, a brief exchange at the general store, but Noah seemed to maintain a deliberate distance. A week after the storm, Zara was walking home from school, arms laden with primers to be graded, when she heard quick footsteps behind her. "Miss Ellwood," she turned to find Noah approaching, his usual composed demeanor replaced by urgency. "Marshal Fairfield, is something wrong?" "I've received word that the Sutton gang might be planning to break their man out of jail," he said, voice low. "I'm deputizing able men to stand watch, but I'm concerned for your safety." "My safety?" Zara echoed, surprised. "You were seen with me during the robbery. If they come back." He let the implication hang in the air. "It might be best if you stayed with Mrs. Henderson at the boarding house for a few days, rather than alone in your room." Zara straightened her spine. "I appreciate your concern, Marshal, but I won't be driven from my home by fear." Noah's brow furrowed. "This isn't about bravery, Miss Ellwood. These are dangerous men." "All the more reason not to let them dictate how I live," she replied firmly. Something like admiration flickered in Noah's eyes. "Then at least allow me to check on you each evening and keep your doors locked." "That would be acceptable," Zara conceded, trying to ignore the flutter in her chest at the prospect of seeing him regularly, true to his word. Noah appeared at her door that evening and the next. Their conversations, initially brief and focused on safety concerns, gradually lengthened and deepened. Zara learned that Noah had come west at 18, leaving behind a strained relationship with his father in Boston. He'd worked as a ranch hand, a trail driver, even a scout for the cavalry before finding his calling in law enforcement. In turn, she told him about growing up in Philadelphia, her passion for literature, her dreams of someday opening a proper school with multiple classrooms and a library. Their discussions ranged from books they'd read to the challenges facing the Wyoming territory as it pushed toward statehood. On the third evening, Noah arrived with a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. "A precaution," he explained as Zara unwrapped a compact Derringer pistol. "It's small enough to keep in your pocket or reticule." Zara stared at the weapon, its polished handle gleaming in the lamplight. "I've never fired a gun." "Then it's time you learned," Noah said. "Tomorrow's Saturday, no school. I can take you outside town and show you how." She should have declined. A proper Eastern lady would never consider such a thing. But Zara had left propriety behind when she boarded the westbound train. "I'd like that," she said instead. The following morning dawned clear and cool. Noah met her at first light, leading a gentle mare for her to ride alongside his stallion. They traveled several miles from town to a secluded clearing bordered by a steep hillside that would serve as a natural backstop for bullets. Noah proved a patient teacher. He showed Zara how to load the derringer, explained its mechanisms, and demonstrated proper stance and aim. His hands guided hers, warm and steady as they positioned her fingers correctly on the grip. "Breathe in, then squeeze gently as you exhale," he instructed, his voice close to her ear. Zara followed his direction, flinching slightly at the sharp report and kick of the small gun. Her shot went wild, missing the makeshift target, a tin can perched on a rock by several feet. "Again," Noah encouraged. "It takes practice." They spent the morning this way, with Zara gradually improving her aim until she could hit the target consistently. When they paused for the simple lunch, Noah had packed biscuits, dried beef, and apples. Zara felt a curious sense of accomplishment. "You're a natural," Noah said, leaning back against his saddle. "Quick learner." "I had a good teacher," she replied, meeting his gaze. Something shifted between them in that moment. A boundary crossed, an admission neither had voiced. Noah leaned forward slightly, and Zara held her breath. Then a distant gunshot shattered the stillness. Noah was on his feet instantly, hand on his revolver. That came from town. They packed up hurriedly, mounted their horses, and rode hard for Pine Creek. As they crested the final rise, smoke was visible rising from the main street. "The jail," Noah said grimly. "They've come for their man." The scene that greeted them was chaotic townsfolk scattering for cover. The wooden jail building ablaze at one corner, and mounted men exchanging gunfire with several of Noah's deputies who had barricaded themselves behind overturned wagons. "Get to the schoolhouse," Noah ordered, drawing his weapon. "It's made of brick, you'll be safer there." "What about you?" Zara demanded. "This is my job," he said simply. Then unexpectedly, he leaned across the space between their horses and kissed her, a brief, fierce press of his lips against hers. "Stay alive, Zara Ellwood." Before she could respond, he was gone, galloping toward the heart of the gunfight. Zara touched her fingers to her lips, momentarily stunned. Then survival instinct took over. She turned her horse toward the schoolhouse, keeping to the back alleys to avoid the main conflict. The schoolhouse stood empty and silent, its sturdy brick walls offering the promised shelter. Zara secured her horse in the small stable behind the building, then slipped inside, locking the heavy door behind her. She moved to a window that offered a partial view of the town center, the derringer clutched in her trembling hand. The gunfight continued for what seemed like hours, but was likely only minutes. She caught glimpses of Noah moving strategically from cover to cover, directing his deputies with hand signals. The Sutton gang, she counted 5 riders, were attempting to break through to the jail, where presumably their captured companion waited. A sudden movement at the schoolhouse's rear door made Zara whirl around, gun raised. The door shuddered under impact, then burst open to reveal a tall, gaunt man with a week's growth of beard and wild eyes. "Well now," he drawled, training a revolver on her. "Ain't you the pretty little thing that rode out with the marshal?" His smile revealed tobacco-stained teeth. "Guess that makes you valuable." Zara's mind raced. This had to be one of the Suttons, somehow separated from the main group and looking for leverage. "The marshal and I barely know each other," she said, trying to keep her voice steady while subtly sliding her hand with the derringer behind her skirts. "I'm just the schoolteacher." The man advanced into the room. "Don't matter, he'll come for any decent woman in trouble." "That's the kind of fool he is," he gestured with his gun. "Now you're coming with me, nice and quiet." In that instant, Zara made her decision. With a swift movement, she raised the derringer and fired. The small gun's report was deafening in the confined space. Her aim, honed just hours earlier under Noah's tutelage, was true. The outlaw staggered backward, clutching his shoulder, his own weapon discharging harmlessly into the ceiling as he fell. Zara seized the moment to dash past him, out the door he'd broken through. She ran toward the main street, toward Noah, her heart pounding in her ears. She rounded the corner to find the gunfight had reached a crescendo. 2 of the Sutton gang lay motionless in the dirt. Another was being subdued by deputies. But the remaining two had Noah pinned down behind a water trough that was rapidly splintering under their barrage. Without thinking, Zara raised the derringer again and fired her remaining shot into the air. The unexpected sound from a new direction momentarily distracted the outlaws, giving Noah the opening he needed. He rose from cover and fired twice in rapid succession. Both remaining Suttons fell. In the sudden silence that followed, Noah's eyes found Zara. He crossed the distance between them in long strides, reaching her just as her knees gave way. "You're hit," he said hoarsely, noticing for the first time the blood seeping through her sleeve. Zara looked down in surprise at the graze along her upper arm, likely from the wild shot the outlaw had fired in the schoolhouse. "It's nothing," she murmured, though the wound was beginning to throb fiercely. Noah swept her up into his arms as if she weighed nothing at all. "Doc Miller." He shouted to a bystander, "Tell him to meet us at his office." As Noah carried her through the stunned crowd, Zara rested her head against his chest, suddenly exhausted. "Is it over?" she asked. "It's over," he confirmed, his voice a rumble against her ear. "All of the Suttons are either dead or captured." "Good," Zara whispered. Then, remembering something important, she added, "There's one more in the schoolhouse. I shot him." Noah's steps faltered momentarily, then resumed with even greater purpose. "You shot one of the Sutton gang." "In the shoulder," she clarified. "Your lessons proved useful rather quickly." A chuckle rumbled through Noah's chest. "Remind me never to make you angry, Miss Ellwood." Despite the pain and chaos, Zara smiled. "I believe we're well past Miss Ellwood and Marshal Fairfield, don't you?" "Especially after that kiss." Noah's arms tightened around her. "We'll talk about that when you're patched up." The doctor confirmed that Zara's wound was indeed minor, a deep graze that required cleaning and bandaging, but would heal cleanly. While he worked, Noah paced the small office, pausing only when Deputy Jenkins arrived to report that they'd secured the wounded outlaw from the schoolhouse and extinguished the fire at the jail before it could spread. "All 6 accounted for," Noah said with evident relief. "The Sutton gang is finished." When the doctor finished his ministrations, Noah insisted on escorting Zara back to her room above the milliner's shop. The town was gradually returning to normal, though knots of excited citizens still gathered on street corners, recounting the day's events with increasingly embellished details. At her door, Noah hesitated. "I should let you rest." Zara caught his hand. "Stay, please, just for a while." They sat together at her small table, drinking tea that Noah prepared while Zara recounted her confrontation with the outlaw in the schoolhouse. "You could have been killed," Noah said, his voice rough with emotion. "So could you," she countered. "Every day wearing that badge." He reached across the table to take her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I've never had anyone to worry about before, or anyone to worry about me." "Well, you do now," Zara said simply. Noah's eyes, warm and intent, held hers. "That kiss wasn't just because I thought I might not see you again." "I know," she whispered. This time when he leaned toward her, there were no gunshots to interrupt them. His lips met hers gently at first, then with growing hunger as she responded in kind. Zara had been kissed before chaste pecks from earnest suitors in Philadelphia drawing rooms, but nothing like this. This was like the Wyoming sky, vast, wild, full of promise. When they finally parted, both breathing quickly, Noah pressed his forehead to hers. "I've been fighting this since the day of the storm, telling myself you deserve better than a scarred lawman with enemies." "Shouldn't that be my decision?" Zara asked, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. Noah captured her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "You're right. But I want to court you properly, if you'll allow it." Zara laughed softly. "Noah Fairfield, I believe I'm already quite thoroughly courted." The days and weeks that followed brought a new rhythm to Zara's life in Pine Creek. Her mornings were devoted to her students, her evenings increasingly spent in Noah's company. They dined together at the hotel restaurant, attended the occasional social at the church, and took long rides into the surrounding countryside when weather permitted. Word of the Sutton gang's defeat spread throughout the territory, bringing Noah recognition from the territorial governor and an offer of a position in Cheyenne that he promptly declined. My place is here, he told Zara as they walked along the creek that gave the town its name, fallen leaves crunching beneath their boots. October had painted the landscape in russet and gold, the first hint of winter's approach cooling the air. Besides, Cheyenne's too civilized for my taste. And I suppose the schoolteacher had nothing to do with your decision, Zara teased, squeezing his arm. Noah stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression suddenly serious. She had everything to do with it. He took both her hands in his. Zara, I know it hasn't been long, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. The words, so simple and direct, stole her breath. Noah, you don't have to say it back, he hurried to add. I just needed you to know. Zara stepped closer, resting her palm against his cheek. I love you too. I think I have since that day in the storm when you promised me it would pass. The joy that transformed Noah's features was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He pulled her to him, kissing her with a tenderness that spoke volumes. Marry me, he whispered against her lips. Zara drew back slightly to search his face. Are you certain? More certain than I've ever been, Noah affirmed. I know it won't be easy. Being a lawman's wife, I'm not afraid, Zara interrupted. We've already faced bullets and outlaws together. What's a little danger compared to that? Noah laughed, the sound echoing across the water. Is that a yes, then? Yes, Zara said, her heart so full she thought it might burst. Yes, I'll marry you. They were wed in the small white church on the first Sunday of November, with half the town in attendance. Zara wore a gown of pale blue silk that Mrs. Henderson had helped her sew, with wildflowers in her hair instead of a veil. Noah, resplendent in a new black suit, watched her approach the altar with a look of such naked adoration that several of the town matrons dabbed at their eyes. The ceremony was simple, the celebration afterward boisterous. The town had taken Zara to heart as thoroughly as they respected Noah, and the union was met with universal approval. That night, in the small house Noah had purchased at the edge of town, husband and wife discovered each other with reverent hands and whispered endearments. Zara, nervous but eager, found in Noah a gentle and attentive lover who guided her patiently through the initial discomfort to pleasure she hadn't known existed. I never thought I'd find this, Noah murmured later as they lay entwined beneath the quilts, the first snow of the season tapping softly against the windows. A home, someone to come back to. Zara pressed a kiss to his chest just above his heart. You'll always have a home with me. Winter settled over Pine Creek with a heavy hand that year. Snow piled in drifts higher than Zara had ever seen in Philadelphia, and temperatures plummeted so low that ink froze in wells and windows cracked from the cold. School was suspended for weeks at a time when travel became impossible, and Zara found herself unexpectedly grateful for the forced idleness that allowed her to settle into married life. She learned to cook on the cantankerous wood stove, to mend Noah's shirts, to keep the house warm and welcoming no matter the hour of his return. Noah, for his part, chopped endless cords of firewood, repaired loose shingles, and built bookshelves for Zara's growing collection, ordered by catalog from back east. Their evenings were spent reading aloud to each other by lamplight, playing checkers at the kitchen table, or simply talking about their days. And when the lamps were extinguished, they found in each other's arms a warmth that defied the Wyoming winter. In February, during a rare break in the weather, Noah was called away to escort a prisoner to the territorial court in Laramie. Zara, who had been feeling unusually fatigued, promised to rest while he was gone. But as the days passed and her symptoms persisted, a suspicion began to form. When Noah returned a week later, he found Zara waiting for him with news that would change their lives forever. A baby, he repeated, his expression shifting from shock to wonder. You're certain? As certain as I can be without a doctor's confirmation, Zara said, watching his face anxiously. Are you pleased? Noah's answer was to lift her off her feet and spin her in a circle, his laughter filling the small house. Pleased, Zara, I'm ecstatic. He set her down carefully, his hands framing her face. You've given me everything I never dared hope for. As winter reluctantly gave way to spring, Zara's body changed with the landscape. The roundness of her belly became more pronounced, and Noah treated her with an almost reverential care that would have been stifling if it hadn't been so endearing. The town reacted to the news with predictable enthusiasm. Mrs. Henderson organized a quilting circle to create a blanket for the baby. The general store owner, Mr. Patterson, set aside a cradle that had come in on the last shipment. Even Zara's students brought offerings: wildflowers, a carved wooden horse from one of the older boys, a collection of smooth stones that the youngest girl insisted would keep the baby safe. In early April, just as the first green shoots were pushing through the thawing earth, a band of Arapaho passed near Pine Creek on their way to summer hunting grounds. Relations between the town and the tribe had been peaceful if distant, but tension rose when 3 Arapaho women arrived at the marshal's office seeking help. Noah, with Zara translating through her limited knowledge of the Arapaho language supplemented by sign talk, learned that a group of men had attacked their camp the previous night, stealing horses and supplies. The women had come to Pine Creek while the Arapaho men tracked the thieves. "Horse thieves been hitting ranches too," Noah told Zara later as they discussed the situation. "Likely the same gang. I need to help." Zara nodded, understanding the necessity despite her concern. "When will you go?" "First light." "I've sent word to the Arapaho camp that I'll meet their trackers at Elk Creek." He reached out to rest a hand on her growing belly. "I don't like leaving you, especially now." "We'll be fine," Zara assured him, covering his hand with her own. "This little one isn't due for months yet." Noah kissed her forehead. 2 days, 3 at most, I promise." But promises, Zara would learn, were sometimes beyond a man's power to keep. 3 days passed with no word, then 4. On the 5th morning, as Zara was preparing for school, a rider appeared at their door. Deputy Jenkins, his face grim. "Found Noah's horse," he said without preamble. "Shot dead about 15 miles north, signs of a struggle, blood on the ground." He removed his hat. "No sign of the marshal, madam." Zara gripped the door frame, sudden dizziness threatening to overwhelm her. "He's not dead," she stated flatly. "I would know, I would feel it." Jenkins looked doubtful but nodded. "We've got a search party forming. The Arapaho are helping too. They lost men to these thieves as well." "I'm coming with you," Zara said, already turning to gather her things. "Mrs. Fairfield, in your condition, I'm coming," she repeated, her tone brooking no argument. "Noah is my husband. I won't sit here waiting." Despite protests from Jenkins and several other townsfolk, Zara joined the search party on a steady mare borrowed from the livery. They rode north, following tracks that told a grim story. Noah and the Arapaho trackers had indeed found the horse thieves, but the confrontation had gone badly. By nightfall, they reached a narrow canyon where evidence of a gun battle littered the ground. 3 bodies, men unknown to Zara, lay where they had fallen. Of Noah and the Arapaho men, there was no sign, but a trail of blood led deeper into the canyon. "We'll camp here," Jenkins decided as darkness made further tracking impossible. "Continue at first light." That night, as she huddled near the fire, Zara felt the baby move within her, strong, insistent kicks that seemed to echo her own determination. "We'll find your father," she whispered, hands cradling her belly. "I promise." Dawn broke cold and gray, a light rain making tracking more difficult. The blood trail had washed away, but Jenkins found boot prints leading toward a series of caves in the canyon wall. "Could be they took shelter there," he suggested. As they approached the largest cave, a voice called out from within, speaking Arapaho, not English. Jenkins raised his rifle, but Zara pushed it down. "Wait," she said. Then, using the phrases she'd learned, she called out in Arapaho, "We come as friends. We seek our lost ones." After a tense moment, a figure appeared at the cave entrance, an elderly Arapaho man with a blood-soaked bandage around his leg. He spoke rapidly, gesturing for them to follow. Inside the cave, illuminated by a small fire, lay Noah. His face was ashen, a crude bandage wrapped around his chest slowly seeping crimson. Beside him, another Arapaho man sat keeping watch, himself wounded in the arm. Zara fell to her knees beside her husband, heart hammering with fear and relief. Noah, his eyelids fluttered, then opened. Recognition dawned slowly in his gaze. "Zara, you shouldn't be here." "Hush," she choked, tears spilling freely. "Of course I'm here." Through halting translations, they learned what had happened. Noah and the Arapaho trackers had confronted the thieves, but were ambushed by more men hiding in the rocks. In the ensuing gunfight, Noah had taken a bullet to the chest. The Arapaho warriors had managed to get him to the cave, but 2 of their number had been killed. "Need a doctor," Noah whispered, his breathing labored. "We'll get you to one," Zara promised. She looked to Jenkins. "How quickly can we fashion a travois?" The journey back to Pine Creek was agonizingly slow. Noah drifted in and out of consciousness, his wound reopening twice despite their careful handling. The rain continued, turning the trail to mud and making travel treacherous. By the time they reached town, Zara was exhausted and terrified. Noah's skin burned with fever and his breathing had grown shallow and irregular. Dr. Miller met them at the edge of town, alerted by a rider sent ahead. "Get him to my office immediately," the doctor ordered after a quick examination. While the men carried Noah to the doctor's surgery, Zara found herself suddenly unable to move, her legs refusing to support her. Mrs. Henderson appeared at her side, offering a strong arm and soothing words. "Come, my dear, let the doctor do his work. You need to rest for the baby's sake." "I can't leave him," Zara protested weakly. "Just for a moment," Mrs. Henderson insisted. "Change into dry clothes, have some hot tea, then you can keep vigil as long as needed." Reluctantly, Zara allowed herself to be led to the Henderson home, where she mechanically went through the motions of changing and accepting a cup of tea. Within the hour, she was back at the doctor's office, seated beside Noah's bed while Dr. Miller explained the severity of the situation. "The bullet missed his heart, but it's lodged near his lung. I've cleaned the wound as best I can, but there's a risk of infection. The next 48 hours will be critical." Zara nodded, her fingers tightly entwined with Noah's limp ones. "What can I do? Keep his fever down." "Make sure he takes water when he's conscious." The doctor placed a sympathetic hand on her shoulder. "And pray, Mrs. Fairfield, pray hard." For 2 days and nights, Zara barely left Noah's side. She bathed his burning forehead with cool cloths, spooned broth between his cracked lips when he was lucid enough to swallow, and whispered continuously in his ear reminiscences of their brief time together. Plans for their future, promises that he simply could not leave her now. On the morning of the 3rd day, as sunlight streamed through the office window, Noah's fever broke. His eyes, when they opened, were clear and focused for the first time since they'd found him. "You're still here," he murmured, his voice weak but steady. Zara laughed through her tears. "Where else would I be?" Noah's recovery was slow but steady. The Arapaho sent a medicine man who worked alongside Dr. Miller, bringing poultices that seemed to draw out the infection and speed the healing. By May, Noah was strong enough to return home, though the doctor insisted he not resume his duties as marshal until summer. During his convalescence, Zara divided her time between teaching and nursing her husband. Noah, unaccustomed to idleness, channeled his restless energy into planning for the baby, finishing the cradle Mr. Patterson had provided, carving small wooden toys, even attempting to knit a cap that turned out so misshapen that they both collapsed in laughter at the sight of it. "Perhaps stick to what you're good at," Zara suggested, kissing away his mock frown. "And what might that be, Mrs. Fairfield?" Noah asked, pulling her gently onto his lap. "Being the bravest, kindest, most stubborn man I've ever known," she replied, resting her head on his shoulder. "And loving me." "That," Noah agreed, his hand finding its now familiar place on her rounded belly, "is the easiest thing I've ever done." June brought a heat wave that left the town dusty and irritable. Zara, in her 8th month of pregnancy, found the temperature particularly oppressive. She took to sitting in the creek behind their house in the evenings, her swollen feet dangling in the cool water while Noah read aloud from the newspaper or one of her books. It was during one such evening that they first discussed names for the baby. "If it's a boy," Noah mused, "what about William, after your father?" Zara smiled at the thoughtfulness of the suggestion. "I'd like that, and if it's a girl," Noah considered for a moment. Eleanor, it was my mother's name. Eleanor Fairfield, Zara tested the name on her tongue. It's beautiful. As July approached, and with it the baby's expected arrival, an unexpected letter reached them from Philadelphia. It was from the executor of her father's estate, informing Zara that a collection of books her father had bequeathed to the university had been declined due to existing copies. As the sole heir, she was asked whether she wished the books shipped to her or sold. Books, Noah laughed when she shared the news. As if we don't have enough already, but Zara's expression was thoughtful. Noah, these aren't just any books. They're valuable first editions, scholarly works. They could be the beginning of a real library for Pine Creek. The idea took hold quickly. Noah, fully recovered and back at his duties as marshal, approached the town council with Zara's proposal. She would donate the books to start a town library if they would provide a suitable building and funds for additional volumes. The council, eager to demonstrate Pine Creek's growing prosperity and civilization, readily agreed. An unused storage building near the schoolhouse was designated for conversion, and a committee formed to oversee the project. It's not just for us, Zara explained to her students as they helped clean the future library. It's for your children and their children after them. Books are a legacy that never loses its value. As the library took shape, so too did preparations for the baby. The community gathered for a welcoming ceremony. Tradition Mrs. Henderson claimed was common in the West, though Zara suspected it was invented to justify the shower of gifts that followed. Blankets and booties, tiny shirts and caps, jars of preserves and tins of biscuits for when Zara would be too busy with the newborn to cook, all were presented with affection and excitement. They love you, Noah observed as they arranged the gifts in the nursery corner of their bedroom. Both of you? They love us, Zara corrected, leaning into his embrace. We're part of something here, Noah, something real and lasting. The baby, it seemed, was determined to make a dramatic entrance into the world. Zara's labor began during one of the fiercest summer storms Pine Creek had seen in years. Thunder cracked overhead as Noah ran through the deluge to fetch Dr. Miller and Mrs. Henderson, returning soaked to the skin but triumphant. For hours, the storm raged outside while Zara labored within. Noah, pacing the small front room, flinched with each crash of thunder that coincided with his wife's cries of pain. When Mrs. Henderson emerged briefly for fresh towels, he grabbed her arm. Is she all right? The baby, the older woman's face softened. She's doing wonderfully, Marshal. Strong as they come, it won't be long now. Indeed, just as the storm began to abate, a different cry filled the house, the indignant wail of a newborn taking its first breath. Noah froze mid-pace, his heart seeming to stop and then restart at double speed. Doctor. Miller appeared in the doorway, his exhausted face split by a wide grin. Congratulations, Marshal Fairfield, you have a daughter. Noah moved as if in a dream, following the doctor into the bedroom where Zara lay propped against pillows, her face glowing despite the exhaustion evident in every line of her body. In her arms, wrapped in the quilt the women of Pine Creek had made, lay a tiny bundle with a shock of dark hair. Noah, Zara whispered, looking up with eyes full of wonder. Come meet Eleanor. He approached cautiously, overwhelmed by the perfection of the scene before him. When Zara placed the baby in his arms, something fundamental shifted in Noah's universe. This small, warm weight, this miracle with her mother's nose, and what looked to be her father's stubborn chin became instantly the center around which everything else would orbit. Hello, Eleanor, he murmured, a tear tracking unashamedly down his cheek. I'm your pa. Outside, the last rumbles of thunder faded into the distance, leaving behind a washed, clean world ready for new beginnings. The years that followed brought changes both to the Fairfield family and to Pine Creek itself. The town grew steadily, attracting new businesses and residents drawn by the railroad that finally reached them in 1882. The schoolhouse expanded to 2 rooms, with Zara overseeing both as headmistress. The library, officially named the William Ellwood Memorial Library, became a source of community pride with its growing collection and regular reading circles. Noah continued as marshal until 1884, when he was elected sheriff of the newly formed county. The position brought greater responsibility, but also more regular hours, a change he welcomed, as Eleanor grew from a precocious toddler into an adventurous child with her mother's love of books and her father's unfailing sense of justice. In the spring of 1885, a second child joined their family, William Noah Fairfield, born without the drama of his sister but with twice the lung capacity, as Noah jokingly observed. The family moved from their small house at the edge of town to a larger home with a proper garden where Zara grew vegetables and flowers in equal measure. Life wasn't without its challenges. The harsh Wyoming winters still brought isolation and hardship. Noah's position occasionally placed him in danger, though never again as severely as during the confrontation with the horse thieves. Zara's progressive ideas about education sometimes met resistance from more traditional elements in the community. But through it all, they faced each obstacle together, their partnership deepening with each passing season. The love that had sparked during a thunderstorm and been tested by gunfire proved resilient enough to weather the ordinary trials of marriage and parenthood. On a warm evening in the summer of 1888, exactly 10 years after they first met, Noah and Zara sat on their front porch watching their children play in the yard. Eleanor, now 9, was reading aloud to 5-year-old William, who was attempting to catch fireflies while pretending to listen. "Did you ever imagine this?" Zara asked, her head resting comfortably on Noah's shoulder. "That day when you rescued me from the bank robbery," Noah's arm tightened around her. "Not in my wildest dreams, I just wanted to keep you safe." "And you have," she murmured. "Though I've had to return the favor once or twice." They shared a smile at the understatement. Their story had become something of a legend in Pine Creek. The schoolteacher and the lawman who had faced down outlaws, survived gunshot wounds, and helped build a community while raising their family. As twilight deepened, the distant rumble of thunder rolled across the prairie. Eleanor and William looked up from their game, momentarily anxious. "Storm coming, Pa," William called. Noah surveyed the horizon, where clouds were indeed gathering. But the sky directly above remained clear, stars beginning to emerge against the deepening blue. "They heard thunder rolling like war," the cowboy said. "It'll pass, I promise." Zara smiled at the familiar words that had marked the beginning of their journey together. She laced her fingers through his, feeling the strength and warmth that had been her constant through a decade of joy and hardship. "Some promises," she said softly, "are worth keeping forever." Noah turned to her, the love in his eyes as bright and true as it had been on their wedding day. "Every promise I've made to you, Zara Ellwood Fairfield, I intend to keep until my last breath." He sealed the vow with a kiss as gentle as their first and as passionate as their 100th, while their children giggled and the distant thunder rolled harmlessly across the Wyoming sky. In the years that followed, Pine Creek continued to flourish, transforming from a frontier outpost to a proper town with brick buildings replacing wooden structures along the main street. The Fairfield family grew and changed with it, weathering the inevitable storms that life brings while celebrating the countless moments of joy that make such challenges worthwhile. Eleanor followed in her mother's footsteps, eventually taking over as headmistress of the school when Zara retired to focus on expanding the library. William, much to his mother's initial dismay, chose his father's path, serving first as a deputy and later joining the newly formed Wyoming State Police after statehood was achieved in 1890. Noah and Zara remained the heart of the community well into their later years, their love story an inspiration to younger generations. Their home became a gathering place for children, grandchildren, and a wide circle of friends who found in the Fairfields a model of partnership that balanced strength with tenderness, courage with compassion. And on stormy nights, when thunder rolled across the Wyoming plains, they would often sit together on their porch, hands clasped, remembering the fateful day when a schoolteacher and a marshal faced danger together and found in each other a love powerful enough to weather any storm.